being single is not a punishment, it's not a downgrade, and it damn sure isn't the failure society tries to brand onto a man. Being single is a phase, but not the kind people think. It's a transitional arena, a forge, a wilderness where a man either collapses under his own unexamined weaknesses or stands face to face with himself and begins to build the version of him the world will one day respect. There is no such thing as an inherently good or bad state in life. There are only phases that teach you different lessons. At one stage, love refines you. At another, solitude becomes the only teacher strict enough to make you grow where you've been avoiding growth. And for countless men, the most transformative lessons they ever learned didn't happen in the warmth of a relationship, but in the cold silence left after one ended. The single man is one of the most misunderstood figures in modern society. People assume he's lonely, broken, or incomplete, but that's because most people have never stood alone without crumbling. Look a little closer at the man walking alone, the one who doesn't need anyone to hold his hand, the one who wakes without checking his phone for validation, the one whose life doesn't collapse when someone walks out. There's a different kind of strength in that, a quiet, steady confidence that says, I'm enough without applause. Freedom is the highest form of wealth. Single men own it in ways others can't even imagine. When you stop chasing validation, when you stop needing someone beside you to feel adequate, you begin to reclaim a level of power men in relationships often forget they had. Because the more you chase being loved, the more you hand over the keys to your happiness. Being single is not the absence of love, it is the presence of freedom, the ability to decide who you are, where you're going, and what you value before anyone else gets a vote. It's a sacred space, a training ground, a reconstruction zone where you revive your sense of worth from your own hands instead of someone else's attention. This phase does not make you less of a man. It might be the very crucible that turns you into one. Most men never dare to admit this truth out loud. The moment you stop relying on a relationship to define your worth, you unlock a level of internal freedom most people will never taste. Being single isn't about lacking love. It's about having unfiltered space to breathe, to think, to see clearly, without emotional fog blurring your judgment. You're not lost just because you're walking alone. In fact, you might be the only one walking with purpose, while everyone else is busy distracting themselves from themselves. When a man is single, his energy stops leaking into places that drain him. He's no longer bending, adjusting, performing, or softening just to be seen as good enough. He no longer chases approval or begs for affection like it's some prize he must earn with sacrifice. That shift from needing validation to choosing alignment changes everything. Because solitude gives you something relationships rarely give: clarity, no emotional crossfire, no quiet resentment, no invisible pressure to shape yourself into what someone else wants. Just space. Space to rediscover who you are without interference. Space to rebuild standards you previously lowered to keep the peace. Space to hear your own voice instead of compromising it for attention. And that clarity becomes strength. This is why so many single men are not empty, they're rebuilding. They're not hiding from love, they're setting a higher standard for it. They're not afraid of connection, they're simply unwilling to lose themselves again. That isn't weakness, that's maturity sharpened by pain. Freedom is a currency most people spend recklessly. But not the single man who understands its worth. He decides his priorities without negotiation. He chooses his direction without apology. He gets to build without someone tugging on his time, his presence, or his emotional bandwidth. He owns his day. He owns his effort. He owns himself. That's real power, the power to shape your life before inviting anyone into it. But here's the twist that most men only realize when they've matured. When you become full on your own, the love you eventually choose is different. You're not entering a relationship out of need. You're not seeking rescue from loneliness. You're not trying to escape silence. You're choosing from strength, not desperation. Being single isn't the pause in your story. It's the chapter where you build the man who writes the rest of it. And when you embrace that, solitude stops feeling like an absence and starts feeling like an advantage. When a man steps into solitude, something unusual happens inside him, something most people never get the chance to experience. without the pressure to impress anyone, without the constant need to explain yourself, without the burden of accommodating someone else's emotional weather. Your mind finally settles. The noise fades. The tension loosens. Your thoughts sharpen. Suddenly, you're no longer performing. You're simply being. Most men never realize how much of their identity was shaped by trying to meet expectations they never agreed to. They act tougher than they feel, hide doubts, suppress needs, or silence their opinions just to avoid conflict or rejection. They call it compromise, but in reality, it's a slow erosion of the self. But when you're single, there is no performance left to maintain, no pressure to please, no fear of disappointing someone who depends on your emotional labour. That's when you reconnect with something many men lose early in life, your original self. In that quiet, you begin to ask questions you once avoided. What do I actually want? What are my standards? Where was I betraying myself? What kind of partner do I truly respect? These questions don't emerge when you're drowning in emotional noise. They appear when you finally have the stillness to hear yourself think. And the answers you uncover become the foundation for your next evolution. There's also a shift in emotional energy when you're not tied to drama, misunderstandings, silent battles, guilt trips, or unspoken pressure. Your emotional state stabilizes. Your mental clarity sharpens. You begin to feel a calm you didn't know you were missing. You realize how much mental bandwidth you spent managing someone else's moods. This calm becomes your advantage. This focus becomes momentum. This emotional steadiness becomes the quiet power that elevates your entire life. It's why many single men thrive. They're not pouring their energy into emotional fires that burn endlessly. They're reclaiming that energy for themselves to build, improve, heal, discipline, and grow. Solitude teaches you how to carry your own emotions without collapsing from them. It teaches resilience. It teaches ownership. It teaches inner stability. Once a man learns to stabilize himself without needing external emotional support, he becomes unshakable. That's why being single doesn't weaken a man, it forges him. You see it most clearly in the smallest, most overlooked moments of his day. Take mornings. He wakes up with no messages demanding explanations. No silent arguments carried over from the night before. No emotional negotiations. No guilt for wanting peace. Just silence. A rare, sharp silence that accelerates his focus. That kind of mental clarity is not common, and only a man standing alone experiences it in full. Others trade this peace away for crumbs of attention, but he uses his peace as fuel. Instead of burning energy trying to manage someone else's emotions, he invests that energy into his purpose. His mornings belong to him. His focus belongs to him. His life belongs to him. That is not loneliness, that is sovereignty. You see it again in his evenings. When he walks into his home, he isn't navigating mood shifts or emotional tension. He enters a space that reflects who he is, a space that holds his standards, his discipline, his rhythm. He eats when he wants, he rests when he decides. He organizes his environment with intention, not compromise. That level of autonomy is priceless. There's also the social advantage. A single man expands his network without suspicion or jealousy shadowing every interaction. He strengthens friendships that relationships often suffocate. His world grows, his opportunities multiply, his lifestyle opens. Even in his struggles, the single man grows differently. When he feels sad, he doesn't hide it. When he gets angry, he doesn't suppress it. When he feels lost, he confronts it instead of running to someone else to fix it. This direct engagement with his emotions accelerates growth. No guilt, no pressure, no performance. Just honesty. That honesty becomes a healing force. Men who learn to sit with their pain without distraction grow at an extraordinary speed. They notice patterns they previously ignored. They identify wounds they used relationships to numb. They confront weaknesses they used affection to hide. That self-awareness becomes deadly in the best way. It turns boys into men and men into leaders. The single man rises quietly. He's not avoiding responsibility. He's assuming full responsibility for himself. He's not rejecting connection. He's preparing for a healthier one. He's not afraid of being alone. He's learning how to build a life that stands whether someone joins him or not. That kind of self-built stability becomes a foundation nothing and no one can shake. Here's the lie. Millions of men were conditioned to believe that standing alone means you're failing, that needing space means you're cold, and that refusing to chase a relationship means you're broken. But the truth is simple. Solitude doesn't weaken a man, it sharpens him. It's not an absence, it's refinement. It's not retreat, it's recalibration. It's not punishment, it's preparation. People glorify relationships because they're visible and predictable, but they rarely talk about the silent discipline forged in solitude. When you're no longer trying to impress anyone, you discover a connection with your own mind most men never develop. Solitude is where your real values emerge, not the ones you pretend to have for approval. It's where you confront your flaws without judgment. It's where you face fears you once buried under affection. It's where you build an inner stability no partner can manufacture for you. A man who understands himself becomes difficult to manipulate. A man who trusts his judgment becomes hard to mislead. A man who knows his worth stops bargaining for affection. That's why independence scares people, because a man who doesn't need approval can't be controlled. Love is beautiful, but it is not the foundation of your worth. You do not become valuable because someone chooses you. You become valuable when you choose yourself, your growth, your boundaries, your direction, your discipline, your peace. And here's the paradox. The more comfortable you become alone, the healthier your relationships will be when you eventually choose them. You stop tolerating chaos disguised as passion. You stop accepting disrespect disguised as compromise. You stop lowering your standards for people who don't meet them. When you stand firm in who you are, you stop chasing, you stop begging, you stop fearing loss. Instead, you choose deliberately. A man who has mastered solitude enters relationships from abundance, not desperation. He gives love without fear. He receives love without dependency. He walks away without losing himself. That is the difference between a man who needs love and a man who understands it. Now here's the darker truth, the one men rarely talk about. The greatest tragedy for men is not loneliness. It's the man who never learns to be alone. The man who avoids solitude becomes emotionally dependent. He becomes agreeable, softer, overly available. He hides his real opinions to avoid conflict. He sacrifices his peace to keep someone beside him, not because he's loving, but because he's afraid. He fears abandonment. He fears silence. He fears confronting himself. That fear quietly erases his identity. He becomes a version of himself he doesn't recognize, a man defined by expectation, not authenticity. He says yes when he wants to say no. He sacrifices his goals for temporary comfort. He shrinks to fit into someone else's emotional space. Strong men turn weak this way. Smart men lose themselves this way. Good men become hollow this way. Because the man who avoids solitude ends up living a life he never chose. But there is a way out, and it starts the moment you stop running from yourself. When you learn how to stand alone without feeling broken, you stop chasing the wrong people. When you learn how to sit with silence, you stop fearing the world's noise. When you learn how to hold yourself up, you never again collapse when someone walks away. Solitude isn't punishment, it's preparation. A single man isn't waiting to be completed, he's becoming whole. Once you understand that, solitude stops feeling like a gap, it becomes a gift. This phase of your life is not a detour, it's not a setback, it's not a void. It's a construction site, a sacred arena where you rebuild the pillars of a man who will not bend for approval. When you stand alone long enough, you gain inner authority, the ability to lead yourself without needing emotional permission, the ability to choose peace without guilt, the ability to live with intention instead of insecurity. A man becomes most powerful when he is full, not when he's begging for connection to fill his emptiness. Love becomes richer when it adds to your life, not when it replaces your life. A connection becomes healthier when it's chosen from strength, not fear. A relationship becomes stable when it's built between two whole individuals, not two desperate souls clinging to each other. So if you're single right now, don't run from it. Don't fear it. Don't hate it. Use it. Use this time to build the man who will dominate your future. Build the discipline, build the body, build the income, build the vision, build the boundaries, build the standards, build the life you won't regret when someone eventually joins it. Because when love arrives, not chased, not forced, but welcomed, you'll meet it as a man who doesn't need saving. A man who isn't afraid of loss. A man who understands his worth without needing it reflected back. A man who has mastered solitude becomes unstoppable. A man who respects his own space becomes unbreakable. A man who stands alone becomes a man the world eventually follows. Remember this. A single man isn't lonely. He's liberated. He's rising. He's becoming. Solitude is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your strength.